everyone, I am MSK, aka Master Swag King, coming at you guys today with another video. And in today's video, I am going to be doing my recap for the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1. So, competitive League of Legends is back, and it began with the LEC earlier last week, then followed by the LCK. Then the LCS is also going to be starting later on this week, as well as the LPL following shortly right afterwards. So there is something that a lot of people need to understand before I start talking about what happened during the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1. And that's the fact that I know a lot of people, and including myself, brought up how bad the quality of League of Legends gameplay actually was from a lot of the LEC teams, actually. Now, keep in mind, if you guys didn't actually follow the 2023 League of Legends offseason, then a lot of you guys really wouldn't know this until, the broadcast and the talent on the broadcast brought this up actually throughout, the first 3 days of the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1. And that is the fact that the Summoner's Rift map, as you guys have probably seen, has been changed and altered. Basically, all the terrain has been basically broken up, and then there's been some changes to Rift Herald as well. And you also must keep in mind, not only just with those changes alone, we have so many new items in the game of League of Legends as well. And the items that we were all previously using have been all altered and changed, and mythic items are gone. Even the way, the supports were, stacking, basically, if you would have Relic Shield and you would hit a minion, you would get a stack. All that's changed. So there's been so many massive changes to just the League of Legends game in general for the beginning of 2024, to the point where, these first few weeks regarding, 2024 for League of Legends are going to be in this, I would say, trial and error period, to the point where, even right now, people are still trying to figure out, okay, what is the best item to build on this champion at this point in the game versus, should I potentially get this item first? Is this item really as strong as this other new one? So the quality of League of Legends gameplay is going to be very coin flippy, I would say, but for the most part, as we've seen just with the LCK, since it just recently started, there is some understanding of which champions are still going to be the best versus, which champions are not going to be the best, as well as there's going to be other interesting picks that you can still pull out here and there as well. When we just saw the LCK, we saw LCK top laners pulling out Udyr. We did not see Udyr in the LEC in the top lane at all. We mostly just saw Jax, Renekton, Cassante, Aatrox, the usual top lane champion pool that we've seen in the LEC for quite some time, and just competitive League of Legends as a whole. So I also want to bring up the fact that, the actual crowd in the LEC for the days from Saturday through Monday was going absolutely insane. And I really don't mind if the crowd is actually going insane. I mean, this is very similar to other competitive, sports as well, like traditional sports. Like the crowds go insane in traditional sports. Have you guys seen how massive those stadiums are? Do you guys think people are just quiet? No, people are going absolutely nuts when a touchdown happens, or one of the best players on the basketball team scored the three-pointer, or when one of the, batters, on a baseball team hits a home run. The crowds are going all the time, for the most part, insane. There's obviously downtime, in there as well. Even when I would go to the LCS, and I even gone recently, just last year, crowd was going absolutely insane when certain plays were made, right? So I know a lot of people kind of potentially found that annoying. People need to understand that is just how this kind of things work. And I think that level of enthusiasm and excitement from the crowd just really makes it a lot more, I would say, the banter afterwards is what you're really going to be looking at, because you guys just saw Mad Lions Koi versus Karmine Corp. That was just absolutely insane how the crowd was just going back and forth, constant chants and everything. And there are teams in the LEC that the crowd obviously wasn't cheering for and just didn't give a flying fuck about, even if the players on the roster were from that same country as well. you know. Oh, and the other thing I would like to mention here is the whole like Ibai Yamato Cannon drama. I don't know honestly too much about it, but I like that. I like that there's a little bit of drama and a lot of like trash talk between some of these like teams and the personalities involved with the team, because it just makes things a lot more exciting and it shows that people care. And if these people have like big audiences, they can get their big audience to care as well. So overall, if I'm just looking at everything around the start of the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1, just those factors that I've mentioned, then going into Week 2, we have to kind of see like, okay, these teams are still kind of trying to figure out what's going to be the best way of utilizing what we know about the game right now and actually work towards improving on that. Now, with that being said, let's get into actually talking about the team. So people must understand that a lot of these teams that were constructed in the LEC in the 2023 League of Legends offseason, a lot of people went in with this assumption that these teams were actually going to be better than the ones in 2023 because of just how bad the LEC had actually gotten in terms of just gameplay, macro, how people were even, drafting actually. So if we're at a single point where 2023 was just the worst quality League of Legends we've seen from the LEC, then I really don't understand how 2024 at the beginning part where we're at right now is going to really change that, because a lot of the gameplay was just extremely sloppy, even with the changes. There was a lot of like really bad, questionable gameplay from a lot of the players, actually. And if you're really looking at a lot of these teams, because I know a lot of people watched my my LEC 2024 Winter Split team tier list, there was something there that I've forgot to mention that I corrected myself on the Cloud9 podcast episode where we're going over like the first week predictions, actually, is that a lot of these rosters are constructed pretty bad. If you really look at it, the rosters are constructed insanely bad. It's not just about, do you add like a really good player to your roster and then it just obviously gets fixed, right? That's just not how that works. Now you have to kind of make sure that, yeah, if you are upgrading a piece in your roster, does this player make sense with who else is around him? Because we saw that with Mad Lions last year, where Mad Lions had good names on paper for a roster. Like if you just look at the names on paper from the Mad Lions roster last year, discounting Chasey because he had really played competitively that much before, just looking at it from Elyoya, Niski, Karzi, Hillisang, then you look at that and you go, okay, this on paper should be a third, second place team. This team should be competing with Fnatic against G2. But then, even though they were actually able to have a decently successful year, despite, on the other hand, looking like complete trash, you saw just how dysfunctional the team was in terms of just like gameplay and dives and everything else, right? And even their coach Mac had to talk about that, where, the team dynamic and the players on the roster just not getting along together. So League of Legends has definitely evolved to a point where, yeah, you can get an upgrade, but that upgrade better make sense with the players surrounding him, or you just disassemble your roster and you just kind of reconstruct it with newer players to kind of fit that as well. So I'm going to start here with Team Vitality. So I've gotten fooled by Team Vitality for so long, and it's never happening again. Like Vitality can either spend a lot of money and fail, spend less money and then still fail. They could build rosters where they have a few good players, adding pieces, that fails. They could start a year off pretty solid, fail, or the other one happens where they just look like one of the worst teams in the league. People forget, this org came in at the same time that G2 Esports did back in 2016, and they have been absolutely terrible. This is the example that I gave on the recent Cloud9 podcast episode, to the point where this is just Bizarro and Superman. G2 Superman, they went out to do everything, Worlds, MSI, Championships, everything. Team Vitality, I did none of that. The only good year they've ever had was just 2018 when they had Jizuke and Mini Troop, Attila and Jack Troll and Kikis and, what was the top laner then? Oh, Cableshard, actually. And that's when Cableshard was actually still pretty good. And he was still good the following year as well. But yeah, Team Vitality, what do you even say about them right now? I mean, I was just looking at the gameplay from this team. Like look at that first game that Team Vitality had. And I'm specifically going to talk about Hylissang here. Hylissang was absolutely terrible this past week. The Renata play was terrible. The game where he was playing Rakani went like 0-6. Him and Karzi were just getting like out 2v2'd against like Ice and Labrov, actually. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, it was Ice and Labrov. They were just getting like straight up out 2v2'd in. And you got to look at yourself, and if you're Hylissang, and like, wait a minute, how is Hylissang losing to Labrov? Labrov is pretty bad, if I'm being completely honest here. And the jungler they have now, Douglas, a player that they utilized in the final week of the LEC 2023 summer split. He played that last week because they just chose to bench Bo because Bo was just running it down so hard. Like Douglas, he did a good. He's been, I would say, I'm not gonna say like hit or miss on a bad way. He's been either like, okay, he'll get something done in the early game and then he'll just completely fall off, because it looks like he knows how to be aggressive and when to kind of pull the trigger, but then he doesn't know when to kind of like push it more, you know? So you had it on when they had their first game against like, I think Gigantic X or something, where they were doing a dive and Douglas completely botched the dive with Rel, and it just gave the entire game over. And then even if they could have like fixed it, Hylissang went up like level 3 as Renata into a bush, half health, half mana, and was in a bush where the Blitzcrank, who was what Ignor was playing, could just hook him. Like straight up such terrible gameplay, man. This roster is constructed like garbage. And people are going to be like, what about Vetio? Vetio was probably one of the most overrated mid laners ever in the LEC. Where people like where they said they thought he was really good, and then he's just not been really good. And people are gonna be like, but he won MVP in 2022. That was with major asterisks to it. And you would have to apply major levels of context to really justify that. I'm not saying he didn't play good in 2022. What I'm saying is like circumstances surrounding him made that a lot more and made that happen a lot more consistently than it was just him being really good. People forget he started on Misfits. He was really bad. He was on Excel last year. He was extremely bad. Then he went to Team Heretics. He was extremely bad there. He wasn't really anything there. Then he's now on Team Vitality, and he's bad. Like, he's just not a good player. He's a player where he's just a super passive player in lane, just sits there and does absolutely nothing, man. Seeing this guy just play is mind-blowing. Like, he plays Xerath, and he's just sitting there poking like what Xerath as a champion is supposed to do, but he's not ever like pushing the limits of Xerath. He's never like actually landing any stuns. He's never landing any ults properly. He's just a really overrated bad player. I have no clue why Team Vitality would even take this guy. You know, people said, oh, people just go to Team Vitality and their careers just suffer. Well, you need to pick good players for this to even be applicable, right? Like the coaches aren't sitting there just like being like vampires and sucking all the talent out of these guys. These guys, it's just a badly constructed roster, and they're just clueless on the map, if I'm just being honest here with you guys, right? Karzi, I mean, I think he played fine, but I don't think this is going to be the meta for Karzi. I mean, Karzi mostly thrives in metas where you have like Ezreal, Xayah, Jinx, to a certain extent, Lucian. I think the Aphelios, Jhin, Varus meta isn't where he's going to be the absolute strongest in, but it's still showing that, like, hey, he's still actually trying to win lane with a player like Hylissang, which is absolutely insane how griefed Karzi got this past week. And you saw just like Photon. Photon is just elo held, man. This guy is straight up winning his lane constantly. He just can't do anything, right? Because in top lane, people understand, for top laners, it's really hard to translate your lead in top lane competitively to like basically, you know, affect the map. If Photon is winning as hard as he is in top lane, Douglas should just go up there and just gank for him. Ganking for Vetio is useless. Ganking for bot lane is useless. Just this team needs to just play through top lane, and that needs to be like their strategy. Because this is just a badly constructed roster, and I could easily see this team not making it to the next round. Factor in starting 0-3 like them and Karmine Corp, who I'll get to in a second here. You'd have to literally go with 2-1 and potentially 2-1 with a tiebreaker to get to the next stage at this point. Like, I'm not saying that they're not going to be able to improve or that they could not improve. I'm just saying this roster looks extremely cooked. Like, if you're just looking at the game they played against BDS, where like they could have did a whole lot more with what they had versus what was going on. Like to the point where Sheo is literally invading, dying, griefing, giving over the entire game, and they still can't do anything. Like, throw this roster in the trash, man. This roster is terrible. All right, let's go to Karmine Corp. Karmine Corp is the beloved team in the LEC. A lot of fans. I get it. But this roster is also constructed like complete garbage. So I know a lot of people were kind of running with this narrative that they actually looked a lot more better than what their scoreline says. That's not true. Actually, what ended up happening, and I'll point this out for you guys right now, is they actually aren't good, like at all. This team is actually insanely bad. The only good player in here is Upset. And to actually say that they are a lot more better than what they've shown is completely neglecting how bad some of these guys were actually playing. Oh, and here, I'll go through it right now. Let's not forget, in that G2 game, just that G2 game alone, okay? People said it was close. That's not true. That is factually not true. First of all, this is how you can tell someone is silver, iron, or wood 5. Just because kills are close in a game does not mean it was close, okay? If you look at just the macro and how G2 are actually, playing the game, keep in mind, G2 only lost one bot outer turret, okay? G2 took all the dragons. I think they did, correct me if I'm wrong. They took all their turrets. They took Baron and Rift Herald and the other Voidlings, you have to do it now. G2 out-macroed them at every single point of the game. Yeah, the kills were close because they had a lot of more skirmishing champions where a lot of fights are going to happen to the point where people are just going to be instantly dying. That's understandable. But if you're looking at just how absurdly out-macroed they got, like, that's not close. Go look at that G2 game outside of the kills. Tell me where it's close. They got out team fought constantly. They actually made things a little bit close at some points, but it was only just close in kills. They weren't ever really in the game. The only game they were ever kind of in was the Fnatic one, but even that wasn't really Karmine Corp being good. That was mostly a Fnatic being very hesitant to actually pull the trigger rather than Karmine Corp actually being good. If you guys can watch that game, Fnatic are definitely in a lot more bigger, winning, advantageous positions in Karmine Corp. They just kept making a lot of stupid decisions, like Humanoid running in and trying to fight a Jax on a turret 1v1 as an Akali with half health. Like, come on, that's not Karmine Corp being good. That is just Fnatic messing up. The players off Fnatic were just literally messing up so bad that it made the game actually look closer. It wasn't Karmine Corp being good. You're not going to sit here and tell me that Targamas is good. Targamas is dog shit, right? Cabochard didn't even exist as a top laner this past week, right? Cabochard, I think in one of his Gragas games, took Archangel's staff first. Like, what are you doing? His gameplay on the Malphite was bad. He played Jax bad. This team is also badly constructed. Now, do I think there's not hope for them to steal like a game in these other 2 weeks coming up? No, I think there is a possibility, given how other teams are almost just as bad as they are, they could probably get a few games and maybe even make the next round with a tiebreaker scenario. But the fact that people even thought these games were close were not it, man. It just goes to show you how stupid people actually are when they're actually analyzing the game. Literal retards. There's no way you're about to tell me the macro game that these guys are playing were good. They literally had no sense of macro at all. This is basic stuff these guys know. It's not about the changes. It's not about any of that, okay? Has nothing to do with that. The Karmine Corp and Team Vitality are just badly constructed rosters from top to bottom, And them starting 0-3 is not surprising. Now, I was a little bit more lenient on Karmine Corp, but then I kept thinking to myself when I did my predictions on the podcast, is like, come on, man. Like, if we're looking at who's going to be the star power of this team, then it would have to be Bo. Bo would have to go in, right, and make aggressive plays. And he did. Arguably, Bo is their best player. But Bo cannot communicate with these guys. And these guys kind of look super scared to even make the play because they don't want to be the guy that messes it up, All right, let's go to – oh, sorry. I just hit my desk right there. Let's go to Rogue. Okay, so Rogue also looked like crap. And now people are going to be like, but they won against G2. They did. They won against G2, and they actually played very well against G2. But if you're looking at the games that they lost, they, like, I would have to say this. This team also is really bad, but the point that where this team is going to struggle later on throughout the other coming weeks is Larson. I think Larson has looked pretty bad for the most part. If you're just looking at these first 3 days, and Larson is supposed to be the player that everyone's looking at on run going like, oh, he's where you're going to get a lot of your wins from. I will say that Zoli's had a really good recon game. Like, he was an animal on recon, and I actually thought the meta was going to lean towards more like maybe enchanters because of the like ardent sensor buffs. To be fair, Milo is an enchanter. Bard is an enchanter in playmaking support. Nami is an enchanter herself. So it's going to be like, there's going to be a few enchanters. There's going to be a few like, playmaking supports, right? So Zoli's better have more supports he can play to help comp, because if he can only play recon, then most teams could just easily just ban that out, and then that'll just be that, right? Oh, Rail also counts as a playmaking support as well. So Zoli's, I think, played the best out of all the rogue players this past week, but like I said before, you could just easily just ban out recon or any playmaking support he's going to be good at, and then that's just be that, right? Like comp, he had a good game on Varus, but the other games, he's just non-existent, man. So I guess he's just only going to be good at Varus now, or maybe if like a team is griefing that hard, then he can just clean up kills now. Larson, like I said before, had a really bad week for the most part. Walking back into ganks that he already evaded. Like, what is he doing, man? Like, what are we looking at? Like, this is stuff that people are going to be able to blame, like, no, it's a new patch and all this other blah, 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 right? This is basic stuff they know. Larson literally avoided the gank on Orianna, knew it was safe, barely any health, walked back into die. It's like, come on, man. He knows better than that, okay? He knows way better than that. So that's not acceptable, okay? Mark Kroon has just been almost like, he's just kind of walking around the map making stuff happen, but it's just super mindless. I mean, he looks like he has no synergy with any of these guys, and Jagenda is just there. This is also another like just meh roster, if I'm being honest here. I don't know how they're going to really do better as this split goes on in the other coming weeks. Who knows? This might be one of the teams that also doesn't make it. If you look at how bad they really are, All right, let's go to Giant X. So Giant X, okay, let me see. They ended up beating Vitality, super easy. And they later on lost to BDS. And then they also later on lost to Team Heretics, right? So if you look at the strength of schedule from Giant X, they beat arguably the worst team in the entire league, right? And then they just got completely just steamrolled to a certain extent. I wouldn't say the entirety of them got steamrolled. It's just really lackluster gameplay from them. Like Jackie's, I love to say, Jackie's actually looked pretty good on Nico, but then what I also want to let people know is like a few players that are new can look very good, on like certain champions like Nico and Rakan and Cassante and other like really like big carry champions. But when they play like other things that have to like scale, like Azir, Orianna, a few other mages out there, right? Well, then you're going to see just how strong, they really are, right? Because that's kind of the point of all this, is to basically see like how strong is this guy going to be on other things. Let me actually reload this tab here for a second. So that's kind of where I'm at with Gigantic X right now. I mean, Otawame's trying. He's had a lot more carry potential with Aatrox, but I don't know if I'm really going to be hot on Giant X. Like, I just don't see where the upside really is. Peach is just extremely, extremely bad, and I really don't see a world where, this roster does anything either. Like, I think the LEC has literally about 4 dog shit teams right here, Now, do I think Giant X will be in the same spot that I would say Team Vitality are in? I wouldn't say that, but I don't see much hope for them, in spite of that, is what I would say. I think Ignar right now is looking good on playmakers like Blitzcrank, but there's other parts of Gigantic X's gameplay where he was engaging at times where he just didn't need to. And it's a team where I just look and I go, where's the firepower in some of these players? Like, they were just letting, like, Peach knew that Jackie's was getting hard focused, and he just literally was going around and just perma farming on Sejuani. It's like, well, throw this team in the fucking trash, you know? So let's go to Team Heretics. So Team Heretics lost to Mad Lions Koi, who were predicted to be one of the worst teams coming into the season. Perks had one of the worst Rise games I have ever seen. They literally picked Rise and a few other scaling champs and they didn't even make anything happen. Like, Yoya had a fantastic game against Team Heretics on the Jinzhou. Then Kaiser on Nami looked like complete doo-doo water, right? But then the other games came through, and Kaiser, like, he obviously had a chance to play Bard. Now, this thing also about Bard. Bard easily fits into what competitive League of Legends players want. If you're talking just from a angle of a champion where he has good utility early on, he's strong mid game, and he can also make a lot of things happen late game. So the mentality when it comes to pro League of Legends players is what can be good, like, not just in the early game, but what can also potentially be good later on throughout the game as well, right? So if Bard is a champion where Kaiser can be like, hey, I'll have the most impact on it, and he picks it and he has a big impact, it's the same thing I said with Zoli's with Rakan. At a certain point, you could just ban that if you really think it's that bad. But then again, we've also seen back in the day, or even just last year, I say back in the day like an old man, to the point where some teams don't even do that. They'll know a player is really good at something, but then be like, oh, we'll just kind of beat him just on it. It's like, you could just not have to face it. You could just ban it away. I think from looking at Team Heretics, I also don't know if I'm high on this team either. I think the only way this team really succeeds is if you just safely protect Flakkid. Kaiser is going to be potentially just good on like Bard and maybe another champion like Rel or some shit. And you have like Yankos get into the back line on one of his jungle picks and just take out a few targets, because you're looking at Wonder. You're like, Wonder's kind of in the same form he was previously in on Fnatic before they won with Oscarinin. And then Perks is playing like Rise and Akali and just like invisible for the most part, like just bad, you know? And then let's move to Team BDS. With Team BDS, they faced G2, and people are going to be like, well, wasn't that game kind of close? Not really. It was only really close in kills. I mean, Adam got the better of Broken Blade in lane on Renekton, but if you look at just how the game progressed, he's not someone who's actually knowledgeable on how to play the game outside of lane, even if he's one lane, you know? But when he was on Sion against Team Vitality, and it is against Team Vitality, keep in mind, even though he actually lost to Photon in lane, got completely clobbered in lane by Photon, he was actually able to TP and make an impact on Sion. But how much of that was like, you know, him going to that lane because he knew versus like they're calling him for it, right? But if you're looking at just the G2 game against Team BDS, I mean, just they got out macroed just like Karmine Corp did. Like, Team BDS looked like they were just going for kills and trying to make things happen through skirmishes, where G2 were like, you know what, we'll get kills, but we'll also take something on the map as well, right? I'm not really too high on the Ice guy. I don't really know. I still question why he's here. I mean, I think Thorin said on his show on Last Nation with the Best Damn League show, he kind of hinted that the reason why Crownie's not there is not really because of like gameplay. It's more because like the coaches potentially think he's not going to be as strong in a more like utility focused meta, rather than where he was strong in the meta on champions like Zeri, Jinx, and Aphelios. But, you know, that's something where like, I don't really know if that makes any sense to really just swap your ADC out and not have him play, who was arguably your best piece last year and got you as far as you did. Like, I'm just really not understanding what Ice is supposed to be doing here. You know, Sheo is so lucky. Team Vitality is so bad. Like, you do that against, I'm not saying like every other team, but the fact that this guy completely griefed the early game and was essentially a non-factor in most of it. Bad team, not just bad team, I mean bad target selection on Xin Zhao, invading and dying, he's just so lucky that was against Team Vitality. You do that against like teams like Fnatic, potentially like G2, SK, game is over, man. Like, or the game is in a position where you shouldn't be in a spot to make a comeback from the spot you're in, you know? So let's go to Mad Lions Koi. Mad Lions Koi, I think, surprised a lot more than I thought they were going to be. I will say that maybe we're a little overreact. Maybe people, I would say myself included, undervalued how strong getting rid of those other players could have been for Elyoya's mental state potentially and his synergy with them versus getting these new guys who are basically all inning on potentially like the combination of what they want out of the team, right? So I think you're looking at Elyoya play a lot better now because he's not around Hylissang, and we know that he had a lot of massive problems with Hylissang and other players on how to play the game. There was the grudge match against, Nisqy and with SK Gaming and Mad Lions where, SK Gaming thoroughly clapped them, but I mean, every team that faced SK Gaming, got clapped actually. SK Gaming are legit like the best team in the league right now, and if you told me SK Gaming was going to be the best team after week 1 of the split, I'd have called you crazy, but we'll get to them later. So I think a lot of the Mad Lions players stepped up, but it's really interesting to see a lot of people take a victory lap when Mad Lions Koi beat Team Heretics, and it's like, bro, that's just one game, man. Like, it's just one game. But that level of enthusiasm is still awesome to see at a certain extent. The fact that people were taking like a whole victory lap over a single best of 1 win, like that's crazy, man. To see like all the fan reaction of like go queso, taco salud salad, mojito, balindo, like what the bro, you just beat like potentially one of arguably the worst teams in the league. It's like, bro, that win don't mean shit, but it was nice to see Elyoya pop off the way he did, right? But for the most part, Mad Lions Koi got a chance to, beat Karmine Corp, and that was really huge. Their ADC managed to get a pentakill on Aphelios, so that was awesome to see. I just want to see what Mad Lions is going to end up doing this week coming up, because for Mad Lions, they're going to have the hardest strength of schedule for the most part because they face like a bunch of easier opponents in week 1. So they're facing G2 this week, then they're facing Team BDS, and then they're facing, that's not that hard of a schedule. They could easily finish 2-1. And given how explosive their team might actually be in terms of like pulling the trigger, it's crazy that we thought this was going to be a 10th place team, but no, this team might actually be arguably top 4 in the league if we're really looking at it, right? So let's go to G2 Esports. So G2 Esports had a very, I would say, kill-heavy game against Team BDS, but the macro pushed them through. I think Hans Sama and Mickey X haven't been the best bot lane so far in terms of like kind of what we kind of hold them to as a standard. Now, keep in mind, a roster like G2 made no roster changes, okay? And you have to kind of evaluate how much value are they placing on their regular 2024 LEC winter split standings, right? Obviously, they're not going to just go on stage and just completely grief. That is not happening or ever going to be in their minds. But, are they just trying to basically scale throughout the split going into spring? Because, like, let's be honest, your teams aren't going to, I'm not saying they're not going to try hard. All these players try hard, but just it's much more better with these kind of splits right here to just kind of scale with the split rather than going like all ham at the beginning part of the freaking year in week 1. Like, no one's going to be like no one wants to be like at their top peak form in like the regular standings, right? You're going to need to play through best of 3s and best of 5s, right? So Caps actually had a fairly lackluster week, in my opinion. I think that the Nico game was really, really particularly bad, and he's not been the Caps that a lot of people have been remembering in the past. I think he's looked all right, and he'll have some carry games here and there, but gone are the days of this guy like basically 1v9ing actually. I think he'll still be good. I think he'll still be all right, but that's kind of where his level is, all right to good. I think him being like the best Western mid laner, or even gonna be at like head and shoulders above like all of these guys, I think that's pretty much a ship that has sailed a long time ago. I think Broken Blade played particularly pretty bad this past week. I think I forgot, was he on Kennen? He was on, I forgot which champion he was on, but he had a pretty good like Kennen game, in my own personal opinion, or is that another guy I'm thinking about? No, he looked bad on Cassante, and he looked bad on the champion he was playing against Rogue, but I remember him having a really good game 2, and I'm pretty sure that was on Yone or something like that. Let me actually look it up here, because I actually don't remember, honestly. I remember what champion he played. I'm pretty sure he played Kennen, honestly, or was the other team that played Kennen, actually. G2 versus, I'll just go to Nivea or something like that. Nivea League highlights. What champion did Broken Blade play? All right, give me 1 second here. It was the second game G2 was involved in, not Rogue. It was against Karmine Corp, right? All right, yeah, I knew it. I knew he played Kennen. Yeah, Capital Shark played Malphite that game. Good lord. All right, so we're going to have to kind of evaluate the strength of G2 as the split goes on. Like, I would say in terms of like how people view G2, they should just kind of like completely stomp these guys. But we knew from scrims last year that they would stomp in scrims, but on stage it would never really look as deadly as they were in scrims, right? Fnatic, the player that really surprised me on Fnatic was definitely Oscarinen. He definitely was I would say an MVP for week 1 for me. Was playing so well for Fnatic, even on Renekton, where he went like 0-4. People to understand, sometimes it's not really about score lines. It's about what is this person really getting done on the map. Even though he was 0-4, and they had lost to SK Gaming, people need to factor in, he still got a bunch of auto turrets down, and he still created a lot of lane pressure for Fnatic, you know? So it's not always about score lines, people. You need to understand what is someone actually doing in the game to effectively make the best use of their champion, right? So if I'm looking at the rest of the players on Fnatic, Razork still looks pretty good. I think he is taking his world form somewhat back into the split. Humanoid, I think, is doing a little too much. I'm not saying limit testing, but going ham in situations where he really should not be going ham on. Obviously, the Akali Jax one stands out, but he still has the carry game here and there, right? Oh, Oscarin's Cassante game was great, you know, against Karmine Corp. Really made a big difference with those Cassante ults right there. Then you also have the bot lane with Noah and Jun. Not too hyped on them. They're just kind of meh. I think Fnatic is going to be in a similar situation that H2K was in back in the day when they replaced the bot lane of Unforgiven and I think Vander. And in 2017, they got like Nuclear and Shay. Remember that? I think that's kind of where Fnatic is at right now. They have 3 players who can speak to each other. Synergy is going to be off for the most part. I think Jun's looked okay. I think he's looked fine. But Noah just, you know, it's hard to really get the carry potential out of Noah. Like, he came in to Fnatic last year, had some awesome carry games, but he's not really been that 1v9 ADC that people have been talking about, you know? He's just been like, all right. And he's just better suited to just being on like champions like Sivir and Aphelios or something where he doesn't have to impact the game early on. He'll just be your cleanup ADC. I don't even think the synergy with Noah's been very good with Jun, honestly. But since Fnatic only changed out like one player, they're still going to look primarily pretty good for the most part. They did lose pretty badly to SK Gaming, and they had a close game against Karmine Corp, but I don't think that was because Karmine Corp was good. I think Fnatic were just being very hesitant on pulling the trigger in the game as well. And Fnatic also beat Team Vitality, who was also the worst team in the league, in my personal opinion. All right, last but not least is SK Gaming coming out 3-0. They played the best League of Legends in the LEC so far currently. Niski definitely showing people, hey, I should be on the top tier, you know, org, you know? Like, people got to understand, an org like SK should not have a player like Niski. And people are like, oh my God, SK Gaming, they're actually doing well. Well, that's what happens when you actually buy a good mid laner. There's a reason why people pay good money for good mid laners. This is what happens. Go figure, right? So, but in all honesty, I'm really, really proud of Niski. I know he's a fantastic player. He's not as mechanically strong as other players are in terms of like certain picks, but he is just good overall for the LEC. He's always easily top 3, top 4 MVP level player for the LEC, my own personal opinion, especially in the mid lane as well. Irrelevant having some carry games are irrelevant. It's usually the guy that just kind of like does his job. He just is the tank player. He's the weak side guy. No, he had massive carry games this past week. He carried on Jax, carried on Renekton. And it's nice to know that, hey, this guy can play the carry champions and do very well, right? The bot lane of Exekick and DOS doing what they did last year in winter, being very, very good, being very consistent, very strong. Exekick having awesome position. This team is just, they're the best team right now in the LEC. Hopefully they can take this momentum into the other 2 weeks, because I like what I'm seeing out of these guys right now. Izuma, he definitely had some great games himself. Now, a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's Niski who plays for his jungler. And yeah, Niski does make his junglers look a whole lot better. But, you know, he's not like mind gaming Izuma to just fucking do everything, right? Like, he has to do the decisions himself for the most part. And it's good to see someone like SK rise up to the occasion with the players on their roster that a lot of people go like, oh, this is probably like 5th, 6th place roster. No, they actually showed up in a massive way. Taking down Fnatic is also going to put them in a very good position as well, because that means that that's a juggernaut that's out of your way right now, right? So they took out Rogue, one of the worst teams, right? They beat Mad Lions, you know, also predicted to be one of the worst teams, but after seeing the gameplay from them, you're like, okay, this team's going to be no one we would just kind of just scoff at, you know? And they also defeated Fnatic. So they arguably had a weaker strength of schedule than a lot of other teams. So it's really just all dependent on what happens in week 2 for them. So SK faces Team Heretics. I think they should be able to easily win that. They face Gigantic X, and they also face off against Team BDS. So I would say this is a little bit harder for them this week, but also not. So I think their strength of schedule had a lot to do with them going undefeated. But if just looking at just the gameplay alone out of them, it was fantastic, honestly. You know, these guys definitely showed up and played the best League of Legends this past week. So that is pretty much it for my recap of the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1. I'll be doing my LCS 2024 Spring Split team tier list very, very soon. I should have them recorded later on today, tomorrow, and I'll have that out for you guys before the LCS starts. But yeah, just looking at a lot of these teams right now, man, the gameplay was sloppy. The dives were bad. You know, there was some back and forth team fighting there. But I would say if you're following someone like G2, you know, the players did not play as well as a lot of people, you know, kind of expected. But it really just depends on, you must put in context where you're at in a split versus where you're going to be at. But if I'm being honest, our Karmine, Corp, and Team Vitality look like complete trash. You are going to be needing to do a lot of work to improve, you know? And I don't think Rogue are going to be, and I don't think Rogue or Gigantic X are going to be in any better positions. I think they'll just be slightly better because they have a better grasp of like players. They have better players on their rosters who are more eager to make things happen and kind of know what to do. Whereas with these other two, they're just clueless on the map. They're just kind of content with just playing solo queue and just kind of doing mindless things on the map, you know? But I do also kind of want to see where Fnatic progresses too. Like, we know Fnatic's rosters can have a lot of, you know, emotions and personality clashes there too. But we'll see how it goes. What do you guys think about the LEC 2024 Winter Split Week 1? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll see you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I am MSK, Master Swag King, and I'm signing out, guys. See you guys later.